Hello and welcome to this video where I discuss the potential team-up between Orter and Kaldo to face off against Innocent Zero. As in the previous chapter you commented that they would require both of them to buy time, before he became aware that it was not only the leader of Innocent Zero but a good chunk of their fighting force, or so it seems currently. So as there is no chapter this week, I have decided to discuss how I think these two have the abilities in order to hold off the enemy using what we currently know of their capabilities. First, Orter, we know that he possesses sand magic. To what extent that magic reaches we do not know, but given how he is a member of Divine Visionaries and was commented on directly by another to be required for holding the force back, we can assume he has some of the strongest offensive magic in the series, or perhaps some of the best combat-based magic, without it requiring that the magic actually does significant burst damage. He could rely on the sand to do support his allies or to do damage over time to his targets. Either way he is certain to be powerful. Given what we saw from his younger brother, Virth, it can be assumed that his magic works in a similar manner only on a much larger scale. So the transformation of solids into sand, the creation of creatures from sand which he can remotely control, being able to sink into sand, fire sand off like it is a bullet and so on. Additionally, depending on the way that the author wants to take the story, it is possible that the sand might have additional effects beyond just acting as animated sand held together by magic. Looking to other series for ideas, which Mashle has no issue doing, the sand magic of Orter could have the ability to sap the moisture out of whatever it encounters, in a similar manner to how Crocodile from One Piece does using his own sand. The sand could also have the potential for creating violent sand twisters which act like razor blades, in a similar fashion to Senbonzakura from Bleach, allowing for a great deal of both offensive and defense power. And of course, the sand could have the ability of granting Orter pseudo-flight like how Gaara from Naruto moves around on a floating cloud of sand. Another power which could very well be available to Orter, is that he is capable of awakening the god's power which dwells within his very own wand. What god it would be is something you could debate about for hours, but the point is that he might have the ability to massively upscale his regular power to something much greater, as the only awakened wand user we have seen in the series so far is Rain, and his fight with Margaret did not give us a full explanation on the extent of what a third-liner with an awakened wand is capable of doing. Of course, unless Mashle is suddenly going to dive headfirst into the full-on battle shonen series, I do not think we will be seeing a battle quite on the scale of what any of these characters are capable of, although we might get quite the surprise when we see a divine visionary going all out against one of the world's most dangerous people. But for now, that's all I have to say about Orter, the Desert Cane. Now let's move on to Kaldo, the Flame Cane. In his case, we have seen both more of his power, but also somehow we are left with even more questions than those we have regarding Orter. For instance, Mash notes that he didn't chant a single spell during the entire game they played, and also, unlike everyone else in the setting thus far with exception to Abyss Razor or Evil Eye as I recall, he uses an actual weapon as his main form of offense for when he gets serious, a magical weapon enchanted with black flames, sure, but still a traditional weapon which could point towards a more melee-focused style of combat and training in combat that isn't widespread within the world of Mashle, as people have magic to do the fighting for them. From what we saw from his little game with Mash, he can generate what I assume to be beams of fire with the motion of his hand. Thus far this ability has been shown to only be used within relatively close proximity to the target, but I doubt there is any reason to assume he can do the same over a significant distance. The extent of how damaging these attacks is unknown, but I must assume that they could do a significant damage if he is trying to kill his target with seriously. He has also been shown to have skill in wielding his sword, dealing swift strikes, which when added together with the fact that the sword is enchanted, it is entirely possible that a great deal is physical strength, as the flames take care of burning through whatever he hits like a hot knife through butter. I can see him being a shorter, ranged fighter who has magic acting as a support ability to compensate for defensive and offensive power. For instance, he could rush down a target and attempt to strike at them with his sword, while flame beams attack either stop others from reaching him or incinerate attacks which approach him. I could also see Kaldo from having the capacity for manipulating fire to a much larger degree, perhaps forming it into waves of flame, or creating large floating orbs of fire which fly around the battlefield burning anything that gets close to them. Depending upon the temperature of his flames, he could have the ability to mummify someone by evaporating the moisture from within someone's body by superheating them. This could be helpful when facing off against individuals who may be invulnerable to being burnt or be wearing some heat-resistant material, allowing him to boil them alive from the inside out. I also believe that Kaldo potentially has access to Metamorphose, the ability which Margaret revealed in the last chapter, only it obviously would not be sound-based but rather being flame-based. I bring this up because Margaret demonstrated the ability to use magic without a wand and without chanting by using his hands to make motions and snap fingers in a similar manner to how Kaldo could summon up his magical attacks. And on an out-of-story level, I believe it would be cool to see Orter using a wand awakening while Kaldo uses a metamorphose to face off against Innocent Zero, showing the differences between what appear to be two distinct paths of power evolution for mages in this world, with one calling upon the power of the gods directly and another dragging that power into themselves. Now to discuss how these two could potentially work off one another. The first and most obvious combination which comes to mind is that Orter could produce sand and Kaldo could superheat it to the point it becomes glass which can be fired at the target. This could potentially have the effect of piercing targets which are resistant to both their individual magics. It could also grant them a means of creating both solid walls for the sake of defending themselves from powerful, dangerous attacks, but also could obscure themselves so that they can move to attack from a different angle without the enemy being capable of piercing them directly. There is also the potential use for battlefield control, making certain that certain areas cannot be moved into due to sharp shards of glass covering sections of the battlefield. Moving away from combination moves and into simple supporting one another, Orter could potentially fly Kaldo around on his sand or create shields for him so he can get in close without being struck down by wide-range bombardment. Meanwhile, Kaldo could defend against attacks which could be more troublesome for Orter, attacks such as gravity magic or water magic which might have the potential for making Orter's sand magic more difficult to make use of. I could also see the pair of them working together to potentially capture targets alive for the sake of interrogation, with Orter dragging them underground using his sand, while Kaldo superheats the sand around them to encase them in a glass prison. Overall, I think these two could easily supplement each other, making up for the other's potential weaknesses without too much effort. The only major issue which could be placed before them as far as can think, outside of an extreme difference in power, is if they face down a target which does not rely on actual physical combat, a target who uses a sort of mind or other non-solid means of attack, which can't be negated by their magic. But that is just my thoughts on this hypothetical team-up which was mentioned in the previous chapter. I have been the Anonymous Weeb, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, and if you want to see more of my ramblings, subscribe and press the bell to know when I upload a new video. Have a nice day or night.